here we go. Nothing exploded yet. Although I am getting one of those migraines where I'm kind of losing my visibility. So halfway through, I might just like kind of make some things up if I can't see my slides. So this is inclusive development, using style guides to help improve website accessibility. Just being forewarned, this is not Drupal specific. It's actually inclusive of all CMSs. So if you have any specific Drupal questions that you have afterwards, I'm sure I could help you answer some of those questions. My name is Carie Fisher. It looks like most of my slide got on there. So I'm the accessibility lead at MediaCurrent, and I'm also a senior front-end developer there. So I kind of wear both hats. I've been working with websites professionally since 2005, and most specifically Drupal in 2009. So I've seen Drupal version 4 all the way up to now 8, so I've kind of been around for a while. You can find me on Twitter, and then after this presentation, I'll be uploading the slides to the LinkedIn slide deck, and then also the joined-in one that MidCamp has. You can find me on Drupal.org as well. So how many people in here consider themselves front-end developers? So most of the audience, the rest of you maybe designers? No designers in the house. All right, we can talk about them.
Undecided.
Okay. All right, I won't say anything then. So I assume the rest of you are just excited about accessibility. Right? Yeah, cool. But so speaking about front-end developers and specifically, what exactly does that mean? The people who raise their hand, they could be doing a completely different job than you. Each company is different. Each client job is different. Really, each day is different. Sometimes I'll be in the middle doing Photoshop and InDesign all day, and then the next day I'm writing JavaScript or jQuery, and I'm writing views or panels or doing something more back-endy. And then along the way, I also do a lot of research and looking at the latest trends with front-end developing. So it really, we have a kind of a variable kind of job. So when I meet someone new and they ask me, what do you do? And they're not a developer especially, I immediately think of a poem by Shel Silverstein. Mr. Smeds and Mr. Spats. Mr. Spats had 21 hats, and none of them were the same. And Mr. Smeds had 21 heads, and only one hat to his name. Now when Mr. Smeds met Mr. Spats, they talked in the buying of selling of hats, and Mr. Spats bought Mr. Smeds' hat. Did you ever hear anything crazier than that? So the point is basically is that as front-end developers, we wear a lot of hats. Just for the record, instead of working on my presentation one night, I worked on that little GIF there. I won't tell you how much time it took me, but let's just say that I should have been writing my slides instead. But so sometimes we are website designers, or in the case of myself, I don't do full website designs, but maybe I'll design a component, or the designer gives me the desktop version of the component, but then I have to translate that into for the mobile breakpoints for tablet and mobile devices. So sometimes we're UX, UI specialists. Sometimes we write Sass and CSS or something like that, some theming code. Sometimes we're writing Twig and HTML. Sometimes, like we mentioned, it's jQuery. A lot more jQuery nowadays than some of us like to do. A lot of us consider ourselves also site builders and themers. So we're actually constructing the blocks on the site or editing the content. Just depends on, again, the client. And unfortunately, all of us are also QA browser testers, whether we want to or not. I won't go into how much we dislike IE, but you probably already know that since you're a front-end developer. So how can we possibly add the accessibility hat? We've got all these hats that we have to wear. Do we have the time to add it, and why should we care? So what is website accessibility? And who needs accessible sites? And again, like, why should we care? Why should we invest the time into adding one more thing on our plate? So website accessibility means that people with disabilities can use the web. More specifically, website accessibility means that people with disabilities can perceive, understand, navigate, and interact with the web. and then they can contribute to the web. This is from the Web Accessibility Initiative, and it's a smaller part of the WC3, the Worldwide Web Consortium. It's an international community who sets web standards. And so these are also the people that bring you the WCAG guidelines that you probably have heard of. So they're kind of important. Pro tip, if you ever hear the term ally, A11Y, that's very similar to internationalization, which is the I18N, and the localization, the L10N, where A is the first letter in accessibility. There's 11 letters in between, and Y is the end. So I'm going to be referring to that later, and that's just a short way of saying accessibility because it's a very long word. So who is website accessibility for? It's for everyone. There's about 20% of the population that identifies as having some sort of disability. And this is census data from 2010, I believe. So it's changed a lot, even probably in the last 17 years. There's some bigger numbers actually from the CDC from a few years ago on when they asked people about their disabilities. So you may think of disabilities as like the big obvious ones, like a visual impairment, like someone being blind, or hearing impairment where someone can't hear anything, but there's a lot of different variations of what a disability is. You have cognitive impairments. A person with dyslexia or something may have issues seeing a page that someone who doesn't have that. You have mobility issues. You have the aging population who's becoming less and less mobile. Maybe they can't use a mouse. They have arthritis in their hand. And so it's easier for them to tab to things using the keyboard. You also have temporary, how do you say that? Temporary disabilities, where maybe you break your arm or your leg, or you do something where, or you have a migraine and you're not able to focus on things the way that you want to. So it's allowing, accessibility is allowing some caveats to all those people as well. Seizure disorder is another big one. I have here too also the ESL population, so English as a second language. And although that's not considered a disability per se, but they have problems with maybe reading text as quickly as somebody who is a fluent English speaker. And so if they see a carousel and they don't have a way to pause it, they have to wait till the carousel comes around and see it again. So there's a lot of things to consider. I really think of website accessibility benefiting everyone. And you may not be disabled now, but like I said, you might just age. You might have some problems with hearing and cognitive issues later. So you just never know. So why should I care? It's the right thing to do, as we talked about. It just gives more people access to more information. A lot of times you hear the acronym POUR: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Those are the criteria used for user experience that provides optimal usability for everyone. It's a smart thing to do. The states of California and New York combined is about 57 million people. So can you imagine building a website and they say, okay, this website is awesome, but it can't work in New York or California. Your client would be like, why? That just seems like we're limiting our use case here. So that's one big thing. Why would you want to limit your number of users? It's also lawful. It's the lawful thing to do. So a lot of government-funded agencies, nonprofits, all those, they follow the 508 guidelines. And they're required by law to have certain things being compliant. And actually earlier this year, 508 got a facelift. I think the last time it was updated was 2001. But now they're more aligned with the WCAG 2.0 guidelines, and so there's a lot more things that encompass it. And they've got basically a year to comply, or they go in the same boat as the private sector, which they're more liable. They're fearful of being sued. And I kind of joke and say that, the rest of us hope we don't get sued, but it is kind of a reality. I mean, if the first two things, like the right thing and the smart thing, don't make you think about it, at least the third thing hopefully will make you think about it. Because why would we want to limit our access to our information? All right. So we've already defined what a front-end developer is, that it's variable, right? And we've already talked about the basics of accessibility and what it is. That we know it's nebulous, but it's important. So now we're on to inclusive development. Is that just a fancy word for saying developing with accessibility in mind? Yes and no. So the term inclusive design has been around for a long time. It's been around since 2005. It's defined as the design of mainstream products and or services that are accessible to and usable by as many people as possible without the need for special adaptation and specialized design. So inclusive development is really taking this idea, this design idea, and adhering it to development practices. So it's a way of rethinking the development process that adds value to all users, not just accessibility to some users. So in this pyramid, you can see you got your very tip top, and those are people who need specialized products. But right underneath that, that tier right underneath that, is 25% who have severe difficulties. If you can switch your mind frame from, normally we work on the bottom, right? We just pick one that we know that we like or that we think is going to be good, but we don't, and then it doesn't necessarily trickle up. But if we chose like something like a component or a design or development idea that we have, and we target that 25%, it trickles down. So if the 25% can use it, then the people on the bottom also can use it. So you're not excluding anyone. You're being more inclusive in the way that you're developing. And of course, there's adaptive technologies that are more specialized products, such as a lot of you have heard of, like screen readers or something would be an example of an adaptive technology. So that's a theory. We'll do a practical example. So this is an example of what you would do for inclusive development. So in this case, we're choosing a font. Sometimes these things are predetermined by the client, but a lot of times you have input when you're in the middle of doing a redesign with your designer. So in this case, we would make a font choice that was inclusive. So we would think about fonts like how does the font have any ornamentation that would get in the way of comprehension? You know, you've seen some of those like cursive-y, swirly fonts with that'll look kind of cool, but can you read it? Are the individual letters distinct in shape, or they can be confused with others? In this example here, you have the sans serif, which are mere B and D. And you might not even think about that when you're choosing a font, or even thinking about that. You're just going to be looking at one combinations that kind of look good together. But that's hard for someone like dyslexia or has problems reading certain letters because they look so similar. Whereas the serif, they have those extra little pieces, the serifs actually, that make them distinct. So there's actually a lot of research has been shown that, or been said that sans serif is actually easier to read for most users. And if you look at the body text of most websites, it is using like a sans serif. But there's one, you can just take that one step and say, okay, well that may be true, but why don't we target that 25%, and then it'll trickle down. So that 25% needs like a serif. So let's choose one that is for that, and it goes down. The researchers estimate that 10 to 17% of the population have dyslexia, for instance. And that's a pretty significant percentage, and a lot of times higher than IE users. So again, it's about inclusive development, inclusive design choices. So I don't normally read quotes on a board, but I like this one a lot by Hayden Pickering. If you haven't heard of him, he's really kind of big into inclusive design. And he has a book called Inclusive Design Patterns. And don't let the design part of that one fool you. It's a lot of code based in there and a lot of more theory. It goes really into depth into what this is. And I recommend it if you have time to read it. And he says in here, we're talking about fonts again. By choosing a typeface that we feel the average user could read, we're consciously alienating a section of our users. So we're thinking back on that pyramid. Instead, by selecting a typeface that is workable for those who struggle to read, we arrive at a choice that works for everyone. This is efficient and effective inclusive design. Okay, so at this point, stay with me. You might be thinking, design terms, accessibility philosophies, and I have to rethink my code and rethink my workflow. I didn't sign up for this. Well, I would argue that you might be feeling a way that you're feeling about accessibility today It's probably similar to the way you felt back in 2009 when you first heard about mobile-first approach. So the mobile-first approach, again, reminding you that you design and develop for mobile devices, and then you keep adding features and functions as you go up and to desktops. So I'm thinking that it seems a little bit daunting, as you have to redo some things, the way that you're thinking, the way that you're developing your daily process, but we're on the forefront of a change, and I feel like it's very similar to what it was in 2009, where you felt a little bit overwhelmed, and there's so much to know, there's so many tools, there's so many ideas and things going around. So anyway, I think that you guys can handle it, especially as front-end developers. We change technologies all the time, we add things all the time, so there's hope, and hopefully this will be part of it. All right, so recap, we're front-end developers. We care about accessibility. We may even think about accessibility first, but now what do? How does component-driven design play a part in this? Have most of you guys heard of component-driven design? I know there was a talk just earlier today. If you hadn't heard it, then maybe you check that one out. But this is very similar in that sense, a little bit less technical than that one. But we're talking about, even if you haven't heard of it or you don't use the tools that people talk about, like the pattern labs or the KSS node, you probably are already doing this in some ways. It's a way of thinking about a website, right? But then you're breaking it down into pieces, right? And so your header might have several components. So your header might have a logo and a main menu, and when it's responsive, it goes to a mobile main menu. Maybe it has links to something else, right? It's got a gradient or a cool hero. So all of these are considered components, much like the atomic patterns that you might have heard about as well. You've got the tiny, tiny little pieces going all the way up to a giant molecule. So if you just break it down into little pieces, that's basically what the component-driven development does. So it's much like a house, built out of Legos or other materials. You build your house one piece at a time. So you have your foundation, you have your skeletal structure, you have the walls and the roof and the windows and everything in between. So component-driven development tools allow us to do this, but for websites. A few quick points that besides breaking it down into small usable pieces, you can reuse these pieces. It also allows front-end developers and back-end developers to work simultaneously. You don't have to wait for the markup to be done to move on to theming. And the clients really like it. They like the style guide and the component-driven development because they can use it as a reference. They can see the site being built, the pieces one at a time. They may not see all the pieces together unless you create pages for them, but they can see the pieces, and then after the fact, they use it as a reference for building. So in this case, the missing piece is not James Taylor, but it is KSS Node. We're using this to, it's a JS, node.js implication of KSS Node. So it's like we're using that as our documentation syntax for CSS. So it's something that's readable by humans and machines, and it's designed with CSS preprocessors in mind. So it's a flexible system that allows you to work with any CMS anywhere. So that's why it's a little bit agnostic, but I work at the Drupal shop, so we use it for Drupal. All right. So we have our job, our front-end devs. We have kind of a philosophy or motivation, which is the accessibility. We have our philosophy, which is inclusive development, and then we have our tools. So that equals the Ally Style Guide. It's my little guy. Pretty excited there. So the Ally Style Guide comes with pre-populated accessible components that include helpful links to related tools, articles, and the WCAG guidelines to make your site more inclusive. So I'm going to do a little demo. Let's see if I can get out of here without breaking stuff. Nope, I can't see it. Because I unmirrored. All right. Let me re-mirror. Can you see it? All right. So you should be able to see my code here. Don't be scared away by the terminal if you're not a front-end developer, not used to working with this. I'm just showing you real quick that this is my back-end setup here. So in this particular case, I have Drupal VM running my Vagrant box just to have a site to show. But my local shell is like anything. I'm just going to show you my source over there. So we're talking about components. What we have here in the source are all the components, right? So I'll show you the demo in a minute and the GitHub repository, but basically you have your style guide and you can update the structure as much as you want here. This part is all kind of Drupal-y parts, so you don't really have to worry about that too much. But as you get in here, you can see your source file. Here, let's pick a good one. Buttons might be a good one. So you have something like this. This is your SAS folder or SAS code. And so in this case, I've got a lot of text about what a button is and places to get more information. And then it's the normal kind of syntax that you're used to, right? So in this case, we have like some button things. I've got a mix-in called button. So I've got some more cool things going on there. I've got different types of buttons, like a left button or a right button and icons. So that's that. And then you have the twig, right? And unlike the component driven development talk that was talked about earlier, where they had a lot of variables, this one's actually, a lot of that's been stripped out because we want to make it a little bit more agnostic for, a little bit more agnostic for less Drupal and more inclusive to other CMSs. So in case, like you can see here, things like the class button icon here, but then because this already has a button type, I don't need to add any more inclusiveness here. But down here, for instance, you have a link, and a screen reader, for instance, doesn't know that that's going to be a button. And so what you have to do is you have to add some things like type button, role button. Your ID is usually good, especially if in this case it's linking to some JavaScript. And then this aria pressed false as just a way of saying that, and it toggles with the JavaScript. Like if you haven't pressed it yet, it's going to say false. When you press it, it's going to say true. So that's kind of just the back end part of that. And here's the demo. So we can take a look at it real quick. This is on my local. You can see because this is Drupal.dev. Whatever, but I'll send a link to this one. This is the GitHub repo, and it's got an actual live site. But I don't trust the internet here, so that's why we have it just on the local. But the style guide has the quick overview. It's got links to the GitHub project in case you want to contribute. And then, so I just wanted to do a quick tutorial or a quick run through on here, just some fun stuff. So for instance, let's say you're at your work and you're building a new component for a new site for a client. And you say, well, I know I'm going to need a checkbox. Everybody needs a checkbox who has a form. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to say, okay, how do I do this in an accessive, inclusive way? I come here and I can read like some information, what it is, some like pro tips, right? In this case, I got a little extra information here, but I'll tell you about that in a minute. Maybe I have a couple more hours to do some research on this. So I have some links here to learn more about what guidelines these cover. So you have things like that. And then if you go down here, you have the markup examples. So similar to what we just showed you with the button markup, this is a little bit more extensive because we have two options, but we have the markup of how to do it. In this case, this checkbox could be made with a field set and legend, which is kind of the preferred method, right? And I'll point that out usually in the notes, which one's preferred. And then for this case, maybe you don't have as much access to your markup. And so in case of, I highlighted the wrong div, but in this case we would use the role group and then an aria labeled by to let it know that what things are connected to each other. If I use, for instance, kind of showing you a little bit of everything here, but the wave toolbar here, what it's going to do is it's actually going to flag those that as missing a field set. Well, we know in this case we are missing a field set because that's exactly what we want to be doing in this example. But again, option 1 is preferable. So I kind of got in trouble in the sense of, like, somebody wrote a ticket and they said, in the markup example, for instance, here I've got some hidden information of, like, this answer is correct, this answer is not correct. And they said, well, why would you hide information that's not visible? And I guess my retort was, well, we hide information from people all the time who are using screen readers. If they don't have additional information, it's sort of like the same thing. So to me, this is kind of like a joke for screen readers, right? So if we had JAWS running, it would say, this answer is correct, Jenny Page, or this answer is not correct, and it would say somebody else's name. So kind of the point is that, there is a lot more information that we could add. In this particular case, we don't need it, but it's kind of a joke. So we have all kinds of, like, different things that we can do. Buttons are a big one. So I did a kind of some different examples, like a print page, an alert maybe. In this case it says, thanks for being an awesome accessibility ally. Just different things that you can do with the buttons, with adding icons. A lot of times I need to still, this has been a project that's kind of taken a life of its own, so I need to get some more time to get in there and I'll do some more updates. Sorry you're missing part of this. I don't know if that helps at all. But in the resources section, I'm doing a lot with linking out to different articles that get more in depth. Again, if you have more time to do kind of research like that. Also things like, let's see if the internet will work for us. I have a lot of tools and stuff that we're going to add to the resources. For instance, this was one that helps you pick out some cool accessible color combinations and test them. So, so this is the Ally Style Guide, and so the point is of this whole project is that these are reusable. This is a reusable pattern library, but with an accessibility twist. So you could take this and really do a lot with it. I can go back to my. Does anyone have any questions about this real quick, or anything you want to demo quick before I switch back into the presentation? All right. So, that's not what I want. Okay, I'll turn off the mirror. All right, so that's the style guide. So the Ally Style Guide is really a simple concept. It didn't really reinvent the wheel in this project. There's really nothing new that isn't already out there. So I kind of call this the Cliff Notes of accessibility, right? I'm taking all of this work that people are doing, all these really in-depth, very thick documents in the sense of what they're doing with it, and making an accessible pattern library. And so you can use this as a reference just as it is. You can just go to that link. It's live. You don't even have to download a local copy or do anything of the technical things that we were talking about. Maybe you just like the style guide layout, and so you can just go in there and take that part. Maybe you have your own components that you're going to be building, and so then you can build off of the ones that already exist. Or maybe if you're thinking long-term, like, if I had all the time in the world, I'd really love to make this like a base theme, right? And again, it's pretty agnostic to Drupal, so it could apply to any, I won't say names of other CMSs, but it could apply to those as well. So I really encourage you guys to help contribute and make it better, or fork it and make it your own thing. Maybe internally you use it. It's a great opportunity to build it from the beginning. So by using this approach, by using reusable, accessible, component-driven approach, and thinking about this inclusiveness from the start, we get a head start on building accessible websites. And so ultimately you're going to be saving time and money, and your site will be more inclusive. So what's not to love? All right, so that's it. Thanks for joining me. Feedback's encouraged, and appreciate your comments. And if you guys have any questions, we have a few more minutes. We're in the dark.
Do you have a site example, like a Drupal site using this in action?
What we do at Media Current is a lot of times we do accessible audits after the fact. And so you build a site, even we build a site, and then at the very end we go back and we say, hey, all those things that we told you to do, yeah, let's rip them out and redo them. Clients hate that because it's not, I mean, they wasted their money. I mean, if you're saying, especially if they have to be compliant. So for the most part right now, we have a few buy-ins and we have a project that we are starting, but it's not available yet to the public. But this approach is like something within our community, the front-end community at my company, that this is kind of how this started, right? Where we would be building something and we'd be like, oh, how did I build that button the last time in an inclusive way? And we don't have time when we're building a site because you've got deadlines and you've got the client's money and you don't want to be like spending it doing 5 hours of research. So this was kind of something that I came up with in the sense internally where people would have a resource for them to go to. And then I decided, well, hey, maybe other people might like it. And so that's why it turned into a GitHub resource. So the long answer to a short question is just that we don't have any fully developed sites like that. But I will caution you that there is no such thing really as a 100% accessible site. There's too many browsers out there. There's too many adaptive technologies. There's too many variables really on people's local setups with their computers. They may have JavaScript turned off, for instance, or they may have the fonts increased really big. So there's a lot of variables. But the best you can do is adding these little touches here and there. And just just adding one to your workflow, one button. Maybe you just focus on the button and you're like, oh, hey, that's how I do a button. And then the next time you're like, oh yeah, I can do the button. And then let's add, links or link focus, or let's, just build on it. So I think of it as the kind of a process.
Add on to that with forms,
sure.
Because forms are a big thing. Have you, the Drupal 8 in forms, have you looked at that, or have you thought about reaching out to the forums?
So you're right.
Because this is great. So.
Yeah, well, no, it's like I said, it's a combination of a lot of effort and work from other people as well, and I'm just helping put it together in one spot. But yeah, forms is a big one. Forms are really hard to get right, and there's a lot of things, especially now, where people want to have the fancy forms where they have the label inside the box and then it moves, and then different kind of error messages and whatnot. So the good news is that Drupal 8, as you all probably know, or if you don't, I'll tell you, is a lot more accessible than Drupal 7. So coming right off the bat, like if your client is interested in having an accessible website and they're okay with Drupal 8, then that's where they should go. Forms is one of those things. In Drupal 8 it's better than it was in Drupal 7 and all the previous ones, but it's not perfect. So I think that and in my sample, it's again the style guide that's agnostic to platform, but those things could be applied to the form. So in our case, I'd have to dig a little bit deeper in what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong, but some of that kind of stuff could be applied with just custom code too. Like adding, like for instance, a preprocessor that adds in an ARIA label or something. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, but I'd be interested in learning more about what they are doing right and doing wrong. But yeah, sure.
Which serif font do you think is most readable?
Oh, so based on the research I've read, there's a lot of argument about what is a good font and what's a bad font, right? And I don't have specific ones that I would recommend versus the other. And there's also even some things that there are fonts that are out there that are geared towards for people that have dyslexia, like open dyslexia font. But then there's been research that says that those aren't good for them. So it really, again, I think it comes down to the individual and just choosing something that that's not going to have like a mirror. You have ascenders and descenders, like a D and a P. So making sure that those are different. Like your P is different than your Q. Like your number 1 and your capital I and your lowercase l, a lot of fonts have those looking exactly the same. And so you want to pick a font that's distinctive on all those characters.
Okay. What font do you use?
Let's see what font I used here. My style guide, you guys can't see my screen, so I'm just looking at the code real quick. Veranda with Arial and sans serif as a background. So I don't know if I can show this again. Maybe if I go back into the settings. There we go. So I just looked in the inspector to see what I had. And so this is a sans serif in the base, even though I told you not to do that. But then if you look at different letters, like the D's and see how the T, I don't know if you guys can see that. Maybe I need to make it a little bit bigger here. Oh, I lost my T. But for instance, like this T, you see how it's shifted a little bit, the cross line, and then it kind of curves up a little bit. So it's a very distinctive T. Like the one right here, you can see an example of a one. It's got the little serif, kind of looks like a little bit of a serif, but it's got the line underneath it. So it is a sans serif font, but in this case, it's pretty accessible. I'd have to do some like real testing to know how accessible, but that is one of the ones that they recommend. And it's also one that, you know, a lot of times we get fancy with Google fonts and things like that people have to install, or the browser has to install, and somebody who has difficulty reading may not even have those available. So it's going to default back all the way back to just the regular base sans serif. Like that. So, I mean, again, like I said, it's hard to get 100%. There's probably not such a thing as 100%, but you can do these little tweaks here and there to make it even more accessible. Go ahead.
Are there Drupal modules that you can recommend, specifically Homes?
Yeah.
Totally. Do you have an opinion
On which one?
Homes.
I don't know about the Homes.
Okay, it's kind of a developer tool that highlights potential problems, and you can mouse over them, and it'll inform you if you're missing. Context or that kind of thing.
I was actually talking with somebody yesterday. I won't put him on the spot, but his place, and they have a tool that they were using that was kind of pointing out some of these things. And I kind of showed him this one, the Wave tool, which is free. In this case, it's got a Chrome extension, and so it's not something you have to purchase. It's not anything you have to install. And then in the case of this, where you're kind of CMS agnostic, it doesn't even matter. You can take the Wave tool and you can go to the Wave website and do the same thing, but I like the little browser one. But it does the same thing. It'll tell you, like, you've probably used Wave before, but that's what I prefer. But again, that does the WCAG 2.0 guidelines versus whatever arbitrary thing the custom tool would be using. So I try to use that as much as possible. Any more questions? Yep.
Do you guys have any other particular processes in place at MidCamp for testing accessibility aside from, the Wave tool is really cool?
Yeah, we have some tools.
What else do you guys do formally or not?
So again, most of the accessibility that we get into is after the fact, is a lot more audits. So we have a guideline and checklist internal that we go through, and we look at some things like this. But it's similar to the Wave tool in the sense that we're pointing out ones that are misaligned with the WCAG 2.0s. But a lot of the accessibility testing, honestly, is manual process. There's a lot of automated tools that are out there, but not all of them are good. And some will hit some things really well, and some will hit the other things really well. I wish they would just open source everything so that we could take the best of all the pieces there. So really, besides the manual checklist process, and there's not a lot more to do that. And Wave tools, and we have tools like JAWS and whatnot. So we have different ones to simulate what someone, for instance, JAWS is like a screen reader system program. I'm sure I could call that, or yeah. So we use that sometimes to just kind of show what that is. For instance, too, there's some things like in the guidelines, let's see, the resources. You have tools just like this, like the color blindness simulator, right? And it can show you like what your site page would look like if it was with somebody who had that's a normal eyesight. You've got some different really highly technical names here. I'm not going to even try to, but blue blind, for instance, is one. So we do some of these kind of testing, but we have kind of a group of them and kind of use them here and there. But I'm hoping to get more of those resources into the style guide.
Yeah. The part that I found really tricky is testing like interactive widgets, whether it's like some, you know, a tab widget or some sort of like an accordion or something like that, where things can, just a subtle mistake or lack of following best practices can make the tool really, really difficult to use by particular screen readers, and just testing those kind of ways I found really challenging.
It's true, and we have one client who's going to let us be doing some user testing, some real user testing. I think that's really where, like, the meat of the testing should be anyway, because the people who are using these technologies, assistive technologies, to actually look at the sites, and then they can give us the feedback and tell us what we're doing wrong. But ideally, in like a perfect world, right, we're going to get to the point where we won't have to do that. Like, all of that will be baked in from the beginning, and it'll be like a few minor tweaks here and there, or making it a little bit more accessible. But I mean, if we build it in from the beginning, there's going to be no audits. People hate audits. They think of it as a negative thing. Why waste the time? Why have to rehash everything, you know? Get it built in at the beginning and then kind of go. But I'm a little opinionated about that. Sorry. Go ahead.
Have you, we do a lot of sites where we use a lot of background images. Is there any accessibility, since there's no image tags, you can't put any alt text on a background image? Is there anything you work on for that? Or?
Yeah, I think you could probably do like a pre-processor to add that kind of alt image tag information, because I know what you're talking about. When you have it in the CSS, like versus like hard-coded in the markup. Right. That would be one idea, but if it's a decorative image, if you're using it for purely decoration, there's no information that you have to be sending, then it shouldn't have alt text anyway. Because when an image doesn't have alt text, then the screen reader knows to skip it. They see it as purely decorative, right? And so for the case of, I don't know, if you had like an icon on a button or something that's not informing the button choices, then you don't need the alt text on it. So in your case, I don't know if your heroes are things, or your giant images are things that need alt text. So it just depends on the context.
Yeah, because some of them do. Some of them they probably should have alt text on them.
Yeah, or if they have any, hopefully they don't have any text embedded in them at least.
No.
Okay, good. Because that's hard to read too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that you would be able to do some sort of process like thing and add the alt text, or just switch it up, add them, change them from your CSS and put them in the markup, right? I mean, you can do it both ways, right? So there's not, it depends again on your scenario, but
yeah,
you might be more limited.
we do a lot of background cover with CSS, so
Yeah.
it's trickier to do that with an image tag.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. Yeah, but actually, let me brainstorm on that a little bit more and see if there's any more suggestions I can come up with, or if anyone else uses.
With us, our guiding principles is the POUR, as
Yep.
you said. Is this perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust? And we challenge each other on the team on that. So in that case, it is a judgment call as
Yeah.
you see it, but you challenge it as you go. So you have to ask yourself, is that background image helping them perceive what's really going on? Because that's one part. Another part, which will really, pun intended, open up your eyes, is to use a screen reader, close your eyes, visit your site, and have it read it off to you. I know when we did that with our front-end devs, it was cold water on us and what we're building, and it also helped us guide. It was an audit before we had to have an audit. In full disclosure, we do a lot of hospital websites, so it's extremely irresponsible if we don't approach it in this way. To have people be able to fill out a form, to be able to perceive what's really going on in the page, and keep it simple. And it also helps with UI UX discussions, people that want to do all the things in the page. Those guiding principles really help you bring things into focus. And you can't go around those kind of conversations. And it's not confrontational, it truly is POUR, you know. It helps you.
I mean, it's like anything in
My
front.
perception.
No, it's true. I mean, it's anything in front end. There are good ways and there are even better ways. So it just depends on which side of the coin you have to be on. And unfortunately, a lot of the things that they want to do with accessibility, a lot of it's still theory, and a lot of browsers don't support all the things like the tags, like for instance, like a nav tag or something. Most of them do now, but it's a progress, right? So the things that you want to do now may not be possible today, but on a year from now, they may be possible to have both a background image and the CSS plus having some alt text without changing the markup.
Right.
But right now, I don't know of a way that besides a preprocessor, JavaScript, something jumping in there, which also has its own issues. But
And any audit is a step,
yeah,
and one change helps you take that step towards it. The more steps you take away from it, but again, just let it guide you and take those steps is kind of what we stress, is that otherwise it's
Yeah.
overwhelming and suffocating to the project. So right.
yeah, I have a little piece down here at the very bottom of the style guide too. I know we have to get going, but it's just sort of like if you're a new beginner, like kind of my tips, like one of them is don't freak out, right? Because there's so much to know and there's so much to do and there's so many tools and there's so many ways to do it. It can be pretty overwhelming. But if we put accessibility first, and we keep doing that one little piece at a time, eventually it's just going to be a normal workflow, just like responsive design is. But anyway, I digress. Any more questions, or I think we're out of time? I really appreciate the questions and the dialogue.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks.